Have you ever loved something or someone you couldn't explain? Something so illogical, so against your plan, and yet it felt like truth? That's what we're here to talk about. Not what makes sense, but what makes you feel alive. There's a quiet war we all fight, every day, between what we think and what we feel, between what we know to be reasonable and what we can't explain but somehow know more deeply. Logic tells us to choose the safe job, the dependable partner, the familiar city. Logic builds a life out of blueprints, lined with checklists and reinforced by practicality. It whispers to us in calm, measured tones, promising stability and approval. And yet, there's this whisper in the chest, a flicker in the gut, a strange weightlessness that comes not from following rules, but from breaking them in the name of something we can't always define. Emotion doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't care about statistics or pros and cons lists. It doesn't consult the people around you or fit neatly inside what you thought your life would look like. It's the sudden rush of wanting something or someone without a roadmap. It's the ache that lingers after a single glance, a sentence, a song. Emotion isn't polite. It doesn't always make you look good, but it's honest, and it's powerful. Sometimes the choices we make with our hearts feel like betrayals to our minds. We think, I know better. We tell ourselves we should be over it by now, or that something so irrational shouldn't be allowed to carry this much weight. But the heart doesn't respond to deadlines or logic gates. It responds to resonance, to chemistry, to meaning. This isn't just about love. It's about art, career paths, decisions that change your trajectory forever. It's the actor who walks away from law school, the woman who leaves a high-paying job to open a bookstore, the friend who ends a perfect relationship because something just didn't feel right. The emotion behind these actions isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, but it's relentless. It keeps showing up. It keeps pulling. And what makes that pull so irresistible is that it doesn't go away just because we try to ignore it. You can silence it for a while, numb it, rationalize it, but it has this uncanny way of finding you in the quiet moments, in the pauses between tasks, in the faces of strangers, in the dreams you try to forget. Logic might dominate the day-to-day, but emotion waits in the shadows, patient, persistent, not to sabotage, but to remind you of something essential. There is a moment, sometimes many moments in life, when everything outside you says one thing, and something deep inside says another. It's subtle at first, a quiet nudge, a restlessness that doesn't make sense on paper. Maybe you're praised for your choices, maybe you're even admired, envied, but beneath the applause or the approval, something doesn't sit right. It's like wearing clothes that fit perfectly, but still make you feel strangely uncomfortable in your own skin. Following your inner truth is not glamorous. It's not a movie scene where everything becomes suddenly clear and triumphant music plays in the background. It's often the opposite. It's messy. It's inconvenient. It can look a lot like failure to the outside world, because to follow your truth, you often have to walk away from things people around you would give anything to have. Stability, prestige, familiarity, sometimes even love. And so the real challenge isn't discovering your truth. The real challenge is honoring it, once you know it. There is a very particular kind of bravery required to look someone you care about in the eyes and say, "This isn't right for me." To admit that what you want may not be what others want for you. It's frightening to disappoint people, to shift their expectations, but more than that, it's frightening to risk being misunderstood. Not because you're wrong, but because you're changing, because you're choosing something that doesn't follow a script. Inner truth doesn't shout. It doesn't argue its case. It simply exists, like a compass you can't turn off. You can try to reroute around it, silence it with distractions, or delay it with logic, but it waits. It waits until you're quiet enough to hear it again, and when you do, you'll know, not because it makes sense to others, but because it resonates in a way that no external validation ever could. Following it means being willing to be called unreasonable, impulsive, selfish, even when you're none of those things. It means being willing to lose the version of yourself that made other people comfortable in order to become the version of yourself that feels like home. It's not rebellion. It's not defiance for its own sake. It's a form of loyalty to yourself, to the voice inside you that doesn't ask for attention, only honesty. And perhaps what makes this so hard is that truth doesn't always come with reassurance. Sometimes it comes alone, without guarantees, without applause, but it comes with clarity, with peace, with the quiet knowing that, for better or worse, you are finally standing in your own story, not someone else's idea of it. We are taught from a young age that life is supposed to unfold in a certain order, a sequence, a checklist: school, degree, career, marriage, house, children, stability, retirement, legacy. It's a script we inherit before we even understand the plot, and for a while it can feel comforting, safe even, like guardrails on a winding road. But somewhere along that path, for many of us, something begins to crack. Not because we're failing, but because we're changing, because the perfect plan that looked so beautiful on paper starts to feel confining in reality. Like a story someone else wrote for us, using characters we no longer recognize ourselves in, and yet breaking away from it feels like betrayal, not just of expectations, but of identity. It's frightening to admit that the plan that once made you feel proud now makes you feel stuck, that what everyone else calls success feels more like a well-decorated prison. It's not that you're ungrateful, it's that you've started to hear a different calling, a deeper one that doesn't fit neatly into a 10-year projection or LinkedIn headline. Letting go of the plan means letting go of the illusion of control. It means releasing the idea that if you just follow the right steps, everything will fall perfectly into place. It means understanding that life is not linear, and neither is growth. That sometimes the things we thought were detours were actually the most direct path to ourselves. That sometimes the dream changes, and that doesn't make you a quitter. It makes you honest. The perfect plan is seductive because it promises certainty. But life was never meant to be a straight line. And clinging to a version of life that no longer fits us is not loyalty, it's fear. It's the fear of disappointing others, of starting over, of admitting that we want something different, something undefined. And yet, it's in that undefined space that we finally begin to breathe. Breaking free doesn't always mean burning everything down. Sometimes it means stepping quietly to the side and saying, "This no longer feels like mine." It means choosing authenticity over appearance, depth over decoration. It means being willing to rewrite your story, not because the old one was wrong, but because you've grown beyond it. Heartbreak is one of the few things that reminds us, without fail, that we are alive. It is visceral, unrelenting. It shows up in places we didn't know could ache, not just in the chest, but in the silence of our routines, the absence of a laugh, the way our body moves through space when something or someone is missing. It strips us down, removes the scaffolding of certainty, and asks us to face ourselves in our most vulnerable form. There is no logic to heartbreak. It doesn't care how long the relationship lasted. It doesn't obey timelines or closure rituals. It can be just as potent in what could have been as in what was. Sometimes the hardest grief is over a future that never happened, a version of life that lived only in our hopes. Sometimes it's not the loss of a person, but the loss of who we thought we were with them. And healing, real healing, is rarely linear. There are no neat milestones, no universal stages you check off one by one. Some days feel like progress, others feel like collapse, and that's the nature of grief. It spirals. It circles back when you least expect it. It lingers in songs, places, scents, inside jokes. It teaches you, in the most intimate way, that love is not a transaction, it's a risk. And it's a risk we take again and again, even knowing the cost. But heartbreak is not just about loss. It's also about revelation. It peels away the illusions. It forces us to confront the parts of ourselves that were willing to shrink or bend or remain silent just to be loved. It reveals where we gave too much or not enough. And slowly, painfully, It starts to rebuild us, not into the person we were before, but into someone wiser, someone who knows that pain, while devastating, also expands us. It stretches our capacity to feel, to understand, to empathize. And somewhere in that process, sometimes quietly, sometimes with great resistance, we begin to reclaim ourselves. Not the idealized version we tried to be for someone else, but the real one. The one who survived. The one who stayed. The one who still feels. Desire is often treated with suspicion. We are taught to question it, regulate it, suppress it, or sanitize it until it looks more like ambition or responsibility, something others can easily respect. We're taught that wanting too much makes us selfish, that longing for intimacy makes us needy, that chasing passion over practicality makes us reckless, but rarely are we taught how to have compassion for our own wanting. The truth is, desire is one of the most honest parts of us. It reveals what we're drawn to before we can intellectualize it. It is raw, unfiltered, and deeply human. And yet, so often, we bury it beneath layers of guilt and shame. We convince ourselves we're not allowed to want what we want unless we've earned it, proven ourselves worthy of it, or had it validated by someone else. We try to make our longing conditional, waiting until we look a certain way, achieve a certain title, become a certain version of ourselves, before we finally allow ourselves to reach for what we crave. But desire doesn't work like that. It doesn't wait politely at the end of a self-improvement project. It lives within us, now. And the real work isn't to judge it or conquer it, but to understand it, to sit with it, to ask, why do I want this? Where does this come from? What does it teach me about who I am and what I need? Self-compassion in desire is not about indulging every impulse. It's about listening without shame. It's about recognizing that wanting connection, meaning, pleasure, or recognition doesn't make you weak or greedy. It makes you alive. It means you haven't gone numb to the parts of life that make it worth living. And yet, self-compassion is often the missing piece in how we relate to our own desire. We're quick to analyze it, quicker to deny it, but compassion? That asks us to soften, to understand that the parts of ourselves that ache, yearn, or hunger are not flaws to fix, but signals to heed. That the inner child still wishing to be chosen, the artist dreaming of being seen, the lover longing to be touched, all of them deserve kindness, not correction. Too often, we talk to ourselves with a voice harsher than we would ever use with someone else. We punish ourselves for not being over it yet, for still wanting something that didn't work out, for still holding on to a hope we're told is unrealistic. But self-compassion says, it's okay. It's okay to feel this. It's okay to not have moved on. It's okay to want something deeply, even if it scares you. Because desire isn't just about outcome. It's about expression. It's about allowing yourself to feel fully, even if it doesn't lead exactly where you thought it would. And there is something powerful, even radical, in choosing not to apologize for what you love, what you need, what you hope for. In giving yourself permission to feel longing, not as a weakness, but as a reflection of your capacity to care, to dream, to reach. The idea of deserving is often framed like a transaction, like life is some sort of moral marketplace where you earn good things by being good enough, smart enough, kind enough, hard-working enough in some invisible, ever-shifting currency. We're taught to ask ourselves, have I done enough to deserve this joy, this love, this dream, this rest? And far too often, we answer no. We link our worth to our output. We tell ourselves that unless we've suffered sufficiently, sacrificed visibly, or struggled long enough, we don't get to claim the things our hearts truly want. We internalize the belief that desire must be justified, that our dreams must be defended, that if we haven't met some unspoken standard of virtue or resilience, then we haven't earned the right to be fulfilled. But what if deserving isn't something we earn at all? What if it's something we recognize? Redefining what we deserve starts with unlearning a lifetime of conditions. It means letting go of the idea that love must be proven, that happiness must be delayed, that rest must be earned through exhaustion. It means understanding that our value does not increase with our suffering, that we are not more worthy because we've struggled longer or sacrificed more, that we don't need to be broken down in order to be built up again. This is particularly hard in a world that rewards self-denial as discipline and calls overachievement a virtue. We are praised for putting others first, for shrinking ourselves in the name of humility, for enduring things we don't want because they make us appear strong. But there is a difference between endurance and acceptance. There is a difference between waiting patiently and believing, deep down, that you're not allowed to ask for more. When we redefine what we deserve, we begin to shift the questions entirely. Instead of asking, "Have I done enough?" we start asking, "Is this aligned with my dignity, with my joy, with my truth?" Instead of waiting for someone else to validate our dreams, we begin to validate them ourselves. We stop treating life as something to be earned and start seeing it as something to be inhabited, fully, honestly, courageously. This redefinition isn't about entitlement. It's not about expecting the world to hand us what we want. It's about stepping out of the narratives that told us we had to settle, that we had to be perfect before we could be loved, that we had to be useful before we could be seen. It's about acknowledging our full humanity, not just the polished, productive, or palatable parts. And sometimes the hardest part of this work is recognizing where we've been complicit in our own diminishment, where we've quietly agreed to stay small, to not ask too much, to be grateful for crumbs because we were told a feast was too much to expect. Redefining what we deserve requires us to reclaim space, not by demanding it from others first, but by offering it to ourselves, by telling ourselves without permission or apology, "This is what I need. This is what I love. This is what I will no longer pretend I don't want." From the moment we're old enough to be asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" we are handed a blueprint, a quiet but powerful set of instructions about how life should unfold. There's a rhythm to it, a pattern. Be obedient, achieve good grades, pursue a stable career, find a partner, settle down, raise a family, and somewhere along the way, happiness is expected to show up like a reward for good behavior. It's subtle, this perfect plan, but it's everywhere. In the way success is measured, in the way people ask questions, in the way deviations are quietly pitied or judged. We are taught that the plan equals safety, that following it is a mark of character, that the closer your life resembles it, the more value it holds, that the further you drift, the more you risk security, approval, worthiness. So we strive, we adjust ourselves to fit the mold. We say yes to things that look good on paper. We silence the quiet resistance within us that says, "This isn't it," and instead try to convince ourselves that discomfort is just part of being a grown-up. We wear smiles in photos, decorate resumes, gather check marks like trophies, and still, some nights feel hollow, some days feel borrowed. We look at a life that may be perfect and wonder why it doesn't feel like ours. And it takes an enormous amount of courage, not impulsiveness, not rebellion, but courage, to pause and say, "This isn't the life I want." Not because it's bad, not because it's broken, but because it's not true. And that kind of honesty doesn't come easy. It threatens the image we've worked so hard to protect. It disrupts the comfort of predictability. It risks disappointing others, and perhaps more frighteningly, it risks disappointing the version of ourselves who once wanted it all so badly. But the truth is, we outgrow dreams. Not because they were wrong, but because we changed, and the plan that once felt like a destination can start to feel like confinement. The shoulds we followed like guideposts begin to feel more like walls, and the longer we ignore that quiet unrest, the louder it grows. Until one day, the discomfort of staying on the path begins to outweigh the fear of leaving it. Breaking free isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's as small as finally telling the truth, to yourself, to someone close to you, to a journal. Sometimes it's invisible to the world. You don't burn bridges or quit everything. You just begin to make space for another voice, the one inside you that doesn't care how things look, only how they feel. That voice doesn't speak in blueprints. It speaks in curiosity, longing, intuition. And what it's often asking isn't, what do I want to do, but who do I want to be? What kind of mornings do I want to wake up to? What kind of conversations do I want to have? What kind of freedom do I want to feel? These questions rarely come with neat answers, and they often don't lead to external applause, but they do lead to truth, and that is the beginning of everything that matters. The perfect plan isn't inherently wrong. For some, it fits. It brings peace, fulfillment, joy. But for others, it begins to suffocate the very parts of them that are meant to thrive. And no one but you can feel the difference. No one but you can know when what you're living is just a version of someone else's dream, and not your own. And the longer you pretend it's enough, the further you drift from the parts of yourself that once believed more was possible. You don't have to burn your life down to begin again. You just have to start listening to the longing, to the discomfort, to the quiet grief of living a life that no longer fits. And then, step by uncertain, defiant step, start building a new one, not perfect, not polished, but real. So, what happens when the heart wants what it wants? You listen, you learn, and sometimes you leap. And even if you land bruised or breathless, you land somewhere true, somewhere you chose, not because it made sense to anyone else, but because it mattered to you. That's not weakness, that's not recklessness, that's the beginning of becoming whole. Because at the end of the day, what the heart wants is simply to be heard, and maybe, just maybe, loved back.